Did you know that 90% of personal finance content online is made for Americans and it doesn't work here in Europe? When you follow it, you're using strategies that don't match our financial systems, our investing options, or our reality, and it's costing you money. As a financial coach, I've helped my European clients get their finances on track, and they often struggle with three pieces of advice Americans always share, but that simply don't work here. So in this video, I'm going to show you what these three wrong pieces of advice are and what actually works in Europe to reach your first 100,000 euros. First, I will show you the advice that almost destroyed my life and my relationship. For 3 years, I followed the American hustle culture because I wanted to make as much money as possible. I worked my full time during the day, then came home and worked another 3 or 4 hours on side hustles. First a watch delivery business, then an educational app. And even during the weekends, I was dedicating most of my time to that. The problem is I was completely exhausted. No social life, I barely saw my girlfriend. Every free moment was consumed by believing that if I just worked harder, I would make it. Eventually, I had to quit my job just to focus on my financial coaching business because I couldn't sustain both anymore. In the US, their system forces them to hustle, with social safety nets, minimal vacation time, expensive healthcare, barely any state pension. They need multiple income streams and aggressive savings just to survive. And that's why hustling works in the US. But in Europe, we have healthcare, unemployment benefits, employment protection, state pensions, and we value quality of life, evenings with friends, actual weekends, time with family. Plus, our entrepreneurial infrastructure and taxation systems don't reward the hustle culture approach the way America's does. This is why this approach is often counterproductive here in Europe. So, what should you do instead? First, focus on working smarter with what we already have. That means first building a solid and sustainable system to manage and grow your money without constant effort. And then focus on identifying the big wins that will actually make a difference in your financial life. Maybe that's learning a new skill that gets you a 5,000 euros raise at your current job. Maybe it's correctly investing 500 euros per month so you can retire early. Or maybe it's negotiating the best mortgage for your dream home. The point is, take advantage of the systems Europe already provides, and then focus on the strategic moves that create real wealth. Second, this is probably the most discussed topic for Americans, but if you follow their advice, you might end up trying to get a mortgage for your house and not getting it. Every financial video on YouTube talks about the importance of your credit score, how important it is to build it using credit cards and repaying debt to get the lowest mortgage rate when you buy your home. When I started learning more about personal finance, I immediately realized how important this was, and I started worrying about mine too. I tried to understand how credit scores worked in Italy, but couldn't find clear information. So I started using my credit card more, thinking I was building my score. I was trying to be responsible, preparing for my future. But a few years later, I learned that by following American advice on credit scores, I was actually hurting my European credit score. The thing is, credit scores in the US and in Europe work completely differently. Here's how it works. In the US, your credit worthiness starts at 0, and every financial action impacts it. You regularly pay your student loan, your score goes up. You miss a credit card payment, it goes down. The point of this system is that you have to actively build your score by borrowing money and proving you can pay it back on time. That's why Americans obsess over credit cards. They're proof they can handle debt. But in Europe, the system works the opposite way. You start credit-worthy. Banks assume you're trustworthy unless you've proven otherwise. So when you apply for a loan, they don't look at a single credit score number, but at things like your income and cash flow, your existing debts, whether you've missed payments in the past, your overall financial stability. In short, they're checking if you have your finances under control. That's why you should be careful about using credit cards the way Americans do, or taking on debt just to prove you can repay it. You might actually be hurting your credit worthiness, not improving it. The only exception is the UK, where the system is closer to the American. but in most European countries, you're creditworthy by default. So, what should you focus on instead to get the best possible mortgage? Focus on showing that you manage your money responsibly. Keep your finances clean and stable. Avoid unnecessary debt. And if you do borrow, always repay on time. Maintain consistent income and savings. Banks care far more about your stability than how often you use a credit card. In other words, in Europe, financial responsibility is your credit score. You don't need to build it, you just need to protect it. Finally, this last piece of advice is probably making you feel like you'll never save enough to retire. Americans are obsessed with retirement accounts. Roth IRAs, 401ks, tax advantage investing. You've probably heard all these terms and wondered, what the hell is that? And everywhere you look online, they say to max out these accounts or you will never retire. They say you need to save hundreds of thousands of euros, if not millions, to be safe. And as a European, you hear that and panic. I'm nowhere near that. I will never make it. The thing is, Americans definitely need to save at least that much to be able to retire. But Europeans don't. In the US, Social Security replaces maybe 40% of your income in retirement, often less. There's no meaningful state pension, so if you don't save aggressively on your own, you just can't retire. That's why they have powerful tax advantage accounts like the Roth IRA and the 401k to make up for the fact that the state won't take care of them. On the contrary, in Europe, state pensions replace on average 60 to 70% of your final salary. Yes, they're not perfect. Yes, the systems are under pressure. And yes, we don't know how they will evolve in the future. But they exist and they will help you retire. Which means you and an American are not solving the same problem. So what should you do for your retirement? First, stop comparing your savings to Americans. They need 1 million or more because they're building their entire retirement from scratch. You have a foundation and protection they don't. Second, ignore their specific strategies. Besides the UK and Sweden, you can't access things like the Roth IRA or 401ks, and taxation is different too. So trying to copy their tactics is like following a map of the wrong city. Third, and this is critical, you still need to invest for yourself. Because even if we have a state pension, it's not perfect. And the trend is that we will retire older and with less money. If you want to be comfortable in retirement or even retire early, you must invest your money. Nothing fancy or complicated, just buy diversified, low-cost ETFs for the long term. This helps you reach financial freedom and take control of your retirement, instead of leaving it in someone else's hands. Now, these 3 pieces of American advice can hurt your finances and slow you down from reaching your goals. But there are actually 3 other pieces of European advice that everyone blindly follows, and they could cost you hundreds of thousands of euros. I've already helped my clients overcome this myth and avoid making mistakes that would have destroyed their finances. That's why I made this next video, where I'll show you exactly what these bad pieces of advice are and what to do instead to build your first 100,000 euros.